See that? In what universe is that in any way a relationship between best friends? This entire movie was a lie. As I'm sure you all have already guessed from the title and the opening clip, today's video will be all about My Best Friend's Wedding, a movie of the 90s that was smack dab in the era of Julia Roberts and a slew of rom-coms that had appeared with leading men like Richard Gere in both Pretty Woman and Runaway Bride, which, before you ask, yes, I will be adding them to this video series of me going back to rom-coms I watched when I was much younger and viewing them through my now very adult lens. So just to toss in quickly, if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, now's a good time to do so and hit the like button whilst you're at it. But as I was saying, the 90s were Julia's rom-com era, with Pretty Woman and Runaway Bride with Richard Gere, Notting Hill with Hugh Grant, Something to Talk About with Dennis Quaid. Yes, the Dennis Quaid of The Parent Trap, which, if you're just finding my channel, I do have a video of how that is also propaganda as part of my rom-com ganda playlist. Shout out to my friend Holly for the name suggestion. I will leave it linked here if you want to pause briefly to check out the video, or you can just dive into the playlist after you're done watching this one. It's all good either way. But back to Julia and the 90s. As I was saying, this was an era of rom-com movies that had us hooked as an audience, which was why younger me didn't really process My Best Friend's Wedding properly the first couple of times I watched it. And before I explain what I mean by that, a quick summary for those who've never seen the film. My Best Friend's Wedding is a romantic comedy that stars Julia Roberts as Julianne, nicknamed Jules Potter, who, after being informed by her best friend since college, Michael O'Neill, that he's getting married, comes to the realization that she's loved him all along. And although she's invited to be the maid of honor at the wedding by his oblivious bride, Kimberly Wallace, Kimmy for short, who is played by Cameron Diaz, Jules decides to use the invitation as an avenue to wreck the upcoming nuptial so that she can nab the groom. What then follows is Jules' hilariously villainous attempt at doing so, all of which she fails spectacularly at. Eventually, she comes to the realization that her bestie, Michael, doesn't actually love her the way he loves his fiancée. She then puts in the effort to have them reunited just in time for Kimmy to walk down the aisle towards Michael, and those two say, "I do." The movie ends with Jules having sent her bestie off, and she proceeds to have a dance with her gay bestie, George, played by the brilliant Rupert Everett, who is the sole shining beacon of light in this entire mess of a movie and deserves way better than having Jules as a friend. In my opinion, at least. But yeah, that is the quick summary of the film itself. Now, back to the previous statement I'd made about how younger me didn't really process My Best Friend's Wedding properly when I watched it as a child. You see, like I said, Julia Roberts was the face of a ton of rom-coms for me, so I was programmed to expect her to get her happily ever after with the person she was in love with at the end of the film. That's how a lot of the rom-coms I'd watched that featured her up until that point played out after all. Remember, people, I was a preteen when this came out. So when I was watching My Best Friend's Wedding for the first couple of times, I am sad to admit that younger Noria kept expecting that the movie was going to have Jules end up with Michael because the movie framed her as the star of the show. And up until that point, as the star, Julia Roberts had always gotten her happy ever after. To give context, the only movie I'd seen Cameron Diaz in before that point was The Mask, which I also enjoyed. And sure, that film does have some romantic elements to it, with Jim Carrey, Stanley getting together with Cameron Diaz's Tina at the end. But The Mask was more focused on Stanley and his journey as a character who, when imbued with power thanks to the mask of Loki that he puts on, undergoes a character arc than it was in his relationship with Tina. The focus isn't on that romance as much, and so I wasn't conditioned to see Cameron Diaz as the heroine of a rom-com the way I was with Julia Roberts when this movie came out. And I say this because I need to give context as to why it was such a shock for me to do a rewatch of this film recently and realize that everything I thought about this film was a lie. When I started my rewatch of My Best Friend's Wedding, I was fully prepared to hate on Jules. Based off of my recollections about the film, I remember that Jules was depicted as this absolutely horrid person who was getting in the way of Michael's perfect love with Kimmy. Now, did I, as a kid, think that she was going to get the man when I watched it back then? Yes, I did. Because, like I said, I'd only seen her in rom-coms up until that point, so it made sense to me. Did I, however, still as a kid, even though she was going to get the man, think that she was a horrible person who the film was going to reward anyway with love at the end of it? Yes, I did. Did that happen? No, it did not. And I'm sure you are now wondering why I would make the claim, therefore, that this film is all a lie when everything I've said so far would imply otherwise. Well, it's because of the why of Jules being a villain. My Best Friend's Wedding puts all the blame of her actions on her being this person who wasn't ready for love, up until her best friend, who she had been unwittingly in love with all these years, informed her of his upcoming nuptials, and she decided that she absolutely had to have him. Even if it meant wrecking his relationship with the innocent Kimmy, also she can get her man. Upon rewatching, I realized that yes, Jules does still suck. But you know who sucks even more? And this film tries to convince us otherwise? Michael O'Neill. Because nobody, not even Child Noria, is disputing the fact that Jules is the villain of the film. The film itself makes it very clear, and I do agree with that positioning. However, what the film likes to brush off and lie to us about is how she becomes a villain. Because she was made into that. She wasn't born that way. And the one who made her a villain in this regards is Michael. And My Best Friend's Wedding tries to trick us out of seeing that. Not only do they lie about Michael's part in the entire ordeal and the role he actively plays in it, they lie to us about him being some sort of catch. He isn't. They lied to us about his relationship, this love he has with Kimmy, as being something beautiful and true, whilst actively pushing for us to ignore a lot of the red flags in said relationship. And most importantly, like I said earlier, they lie about Jules and Michael being best friends. They most certainly are not. And let's tackle that first, shall we? Because I don't know about you, but when I consider someone my best friend, it is not filled with all these pseudo-sexual undertones of said relationship. I don't go about randomly sticking their finger in my mouth, eye fucking them as I suck off the wedding ring that they had slipped onto their finger, but which is in fact meant for my bride, who by the way is most certainly not them, with my mouth. I don't walk in on my best friend whilst they are changing, look them up and down in the most lascivious way, and then tell them with a chuckle in my voice when they try to cover up because one, they are changing their clothes, and two, the bride is right next fucking door. I don't look at that bit of discomfort and laugh as I say that I've seen them a lot more naked than that. Oh, and they look good without clothes on. Like, what? I don't have a song with my besties that we slow dance to. For those who are unaware, I have two best friends. Neither of them have met the other because one of them I've known for the last 17 years and the other for the last 7 to 8 years. But as I was saying, I don't have a song with my besties that we slow dance to. Do we have songs that come on and we find each other's eyes across the room, grin and start belting out the words, the lyrics at the top of our lungs? Yes. Are there songs we will start shimmying together the minute they come on? Yes. Would we even dance together to these songs? Yes. But you know what would not be present? The sexual fucking undertones. I don't have an almost kiss with my best friend when I run into them at the airport and our noses do that conveniently bumping into each other thing. And we look at each other for this brief moment where it seems like we're about to kiss. Because you know what? Best friends does not equate I want to fuck them. And I most certainly do not look back at my best friends with this, I can't believe it, I am married now and I miss you already, and at highs puppy dog look at my fucking wedding. First at the altar when said best friend is my bridesmaid of honor and is walking down the aisle. And then repeat said same look moments later when my bride and I are headed off to our honeymoon. This film lies to us, tries to trick us into thinking that Jules is just bonkers for how she acts with Michael. That she's so far into the Lulu land, forever thinking that she has the possibility of a chance with him. And I'm so pissed about it because the only reason why she's that way is because he enables it. He encourages it. He reciprocates it. He gets off of it. Which is a great place for us to talk about the lie of Michael O'Neill being the prize. Or rather, in the words of Jules to Kimmy when she's trying to convince the latter to go back and marry Michael after Kimmy walked in on Jules laying a big fat kiss on her fiancé and ran away, that he is a man of both their dreams. This is where the male wish fulfillment fantasy comes in. And I'm over here watching that scene and thinking, he isn't the man of anyone's dreams. This man is the nightmare that they should collectively want to wake up from. How did my best friend's wedding convince any of us that Michael is a catch? He most certainly is not. And this is the part where I bring up the age difference, which I think is particularly important when we examine the power dynamics of Michael and Kimmy's relationship. Michael, like Jules, is 28. He's trying to establish himself as a sports reporter and has plans of making his way up the world in his career. Jules is a food critic, pretty recognized and respected in her field. Kimmy, on the other hand, is a 20-year-old university student. Now, don't get me started on the why a 28-year-old man decided to marry a 20-year-old student he only met like 6 months prior, which already has all the disaster bells ringing in my head. But what makes it worse is that she's just a year away from graduating. But now that she's found this up-and-coming reporter who's barely able to take care of his own bills, mind you, because we all know how much reporters earn, especially in the 90s. And she is a daddy's girl whose father is a billionaire, aka she's most likely used to a certain level of comfort and wealth. But I digress. Please tell me why Kimmy, 20-year-old still in university Kimmy, has made the decision that in order to be the supportive wife who gets to follow her up-and-coming reporter husband around the country, she's going to drop out of school in her final year. If this isn't all about fulfilling some wish fulfillment fantasy of a man like Michael. Like, I get Kimmy being swept away by the romance and the delight of the marriage, but he is 28. He is the older one, the responsible one. And you're trying to tell me that he cannot insist on her at least getting her degree first? Part of Jules' grand mastermind plan to push for Michael and Kimmy to not go through with the wedding is to trick Kimmy into getting her dad to agree to a desk job for Michael in his company. Her father, by the way, owns the Chicago White Sox. So it's not like the desk job wouldn't still be connected to sports, specifically baseball, which is what Michael covers in his day job as a reporter. But the minute Kimmy brings this up with Michael, he blows up. Angry and irritated that she's bringing this up, especially when Kimmy explains that she does want to get her degree. And this way, her dad helps. Michael is able to stay in Chicago for a bit and she can finish her education. It's a bit of a sacrifice that Michael can actually accept for a year for her to complete her degree. But this jackass, nightmare, waste of space man loses his shit and insists on calling the wedding off. He is upset that Kimmy is changing her mind about what she's willing to sacrifice for their marriage, whilst he is unwilling to do the same or even meet her anywhere close to what she's asking for. And Kimmy is so distraught because she loves him and also because she's 20 years old, practically a child compared to his 28-year-old ass. Once again, fulfillment fantasy. And before anybody comes for me, please note that by the time he was in college, fucking Jules, in the brief moment that they dated, because yes, they dated briefly and had a blood pact about marrying each other if they're still single at 28. A blood pact he initiated, by the way. But anyway, by the time he was in college, Kimmy was 10 years old. Compared to him and his life experiences, she is a child. He should know better. He should have done better. But nah. My best friend's wedding lies to us that this miscreant is a catch. And watching this film made me so pissed because I repeat, it's all about fulfilling the fantasies. Because I was already primed to dislike Jules as a character based off of what I could remember back when I watched it almost 28 years ago. And I was right in that regard. What I, however, didn't expect was to feel a bit of pity for her as I realized that she wasn't that way on her own. This jackass called Michael O'Neill had been stringing her all along and contributed actively to the way she was acting. And it is why I find myself agape at yet another lie that this film tried to push on us. That Michael and Kimmy would work out. Like, I know rom-coms are programmed the way they are to have the story end in a way that these characters get to go on living their own happy lives together, off-page with us, the audience, unaware of it. And I'm sure that there are a small subset of people who've watched this film and are convinced that there is some way that Michael and Kimmy are living happily ever after in the future because that is what the movie wants us to think. But I am not falling for that lie. I refuse to buy into that bullshit. These two are most certainly getting divorced. Maybe in another year or 2 or 5, when Kimmy realizes just how inappropriate the best friend relationship Michael has going with Jules is. She would eventually see that sure, Jules laid a kiss on her fiancé on the day of their wedding, but it's also because her fiancé was encouraging that shit. She would also realize that her fiancé has a complex and a desire to be the most important person in the room, hence the stringing along he's been doing and how he lost his shit when she suggested he compromise and get a job with her dad for the year that she needs to finish up her degree. She will find out that she married a piece of shit, that he and his bonkers ass best friends deserve each other, and she will go back to school, complete her education, get a degree, and reminisce with Rupert Everett's George about how completely loco both Jules and Michael are. Because of everyone in the entire film, only Kimmy and George are the true innocents of the entire fiasco. But hey, maybe that's just me. I would, as always, love to hear your thoughts as well. Please drop them in the comments. Like this video if you've watched this far and haven't done so yet. Share it if you want. Support me on Patreon if you can. And until tomorrow's video, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.